The peaceful Kanagawa Prefecture in Yokohama City is thrown into chaos by a kaiju that's about 60 meters long and has a fortitude of 3.5. People scatter as security officials guide them to safety in a shelter. Citizens who aren't in immediate danger watch live reports on their phones, speculating about which division of the defense force will respond. One person suggests it'll be Division 3 since the kaiju is in Yokohama. Mina Ashiro, the captain of Division 3, and her team quickly arrive on the scene, scaling walls and firing at the kaiju. As she gets close, Mina takes a shot directly at the kaiju's belly, causing it to explode from the inside out. Kafka Hibino, an awkward loser and the main character, shows up with his cleanup team to deal with the remains of the kaiju, while Mina and her crew receive cheers from citizens for defeating yet another kaiju without any casualties. During the cleanup, a tech team gathers samples of the kaiju from Kafka. One member of the cleanup team gets hurt by a sharp part of the kaiju, and Kafka rushes to help because he's been through similar situations thanks to his reckless past. After treating the injured teammate, the captain reassigns Kafka to handle the kaiju's intestines. Even though he's reluctant, people like Kafka don't know how to say no. He resigns himself to work in the filthiest part of the job. When he gets home later that night, Kafka is still feeling the effects of slicing through intestines, but he's distracted by news about Mina. He remembers a time when he and Mina decided to fight kaiju together. Kafka turns off the TV, thinking he's had enough of the young 27-year-old captain. Still, he can't help but wonder why their paths turned out so differently, ultimately deciding that having a place to sleep, food to eat, and contributing to society is good enough. The next day, Kafka shows up to work with a pounding headache. Once he arrives, his teammate Toku introduces him to a new addition, Ichikawa, who wants to join the defense force like Kafka did. Ichikawa is disappointed to learn that Kafka gave up on his dreams. Kafka explains that he realized others are better suited for it. He believes Ichikawa will understand one day, but Ichikawa is determined not to give up, which makes Kafka a bit envious as he starts to question if giving up is really that bad. On day 2 of the cleanup duty, both Kafka and Ichikawa are stuck with the intestines again. The captain tells Kafka he's skilled at dealing with intestines, and Kafka doesn't argue, which makes the captain remark that Kafka would have done well if he hadn't given up on his dream of joining the defense force. After a bit of work, Kafka notices Ichikawa isn't himself from dealing with the intestines, so he offers him some multivitamins and nose plugs, but Ichikawa refuses to block his nose, prompting Kafka to chase after him. Eventually, the team decides to call it a day, but Kafka sticks around instead of leaving with the others. Ichikawa comes back to thank Kafka for helping him get through his first day at work, and takes the opportunity to let him know that the defense force has raised the age limit for applicants to 32, meaning Kafka can still apply if he wants. Kafka thanks Ichikawa for his kindness, but the moment is interrupted by a yoju, another type of kaiju, that almost bites Ichikawa. Kafka jumps in just in time to save him. He tells Ichikawa to run away since he wants to join the defense force, and it wouldn't make sense for him to die there. He also tells Ichikawa to call in about the yoju once he's safe, and Ichikawa runs off. Kafka draws the yoju's attention and runs as fast as his lazy legs can carry him. He ducks into a building, holding an iron rod, hoping the yoju can't follow him inside. He jumps out of a glass window on the other side, scratching his face in the process. Kafka flashes back to the day when his city was attacked by kaiju. Mina and Kafka lost their home and schools, deciding to join the defense force and figure out who'd be the cooler member of the team. The yoju isn't ready to let Kafka rest, catching up with him on the other side of the building. When Kafka remembers the rule to hit a kaiju in the leg when it attacks, he realizes he doesn't have the strength to do it. The yoju slaps him to the ground, leaving him as helpless as he's always been, until Ichikawa shows up just as the yoju is about to swallow Kafka. Kafka asks Ichikawa why he came back instead of running away. Ichikawa replies that he couldn't escape alone because that would mean he'd never make the defense team, but he did call in about the yoju before returning. Kafka feels disappointed in himself for his inability to save anything. He screams in frustration when Mina arrives to rescue him with her tiger, distracting the yoju while she takes it down. She assigns some teammates to look after Kafka and Ichikawa while pretending she doesn't know who Kafka is. Mina leaps away with her tiger, saying she'll check for other yoju nearby. In the hospital, Kafka acknowledges Mina's amazing strength. He also gets a moment to feel cool when Ichikawa, who's behind the curtain in the same ward, thanks him for saving him from the yoju because otherwise he would have died. Ichikawa encourages Kafka not to give up, and this time, Kafka agrees to try his luck again for a position in the defense force. Luck isn't on Kafka's side because when he looks up, he sees a kaiju, and before he can scream, it enters him. Ichikawa stands up to find that Kafka has turned into a kaiju, causing both of them to scream. An old man walking by the hospital calls out to Kafka. Meanwhile, Mina is in a bathtub when she remembers that Kafka is a liar, as he promised to be by her side when she faces a scary kaiju. She receives a call informing her that a kaiju has appeared at the Yokohama South General Hospital, and she promises to take it out with her team. Mina believed when they were younger that with Kafka by her side, there was nothing to fear, but now, she's talking to her team about the new kaiju that has shown up at the hospital, insisting they need to take it down before there are any casualties. Ichikawa and Kafka, who is the new kaiju, struggle to convince the patients that Kafka is still the same pathetic loser he's always been. Kafka's smile freaks them out, and when he tries to apologize, it ends up wrecking the hospital walls. Ichikawa suggests tests, they make a run for it, and Kafka breaks a window to help with that. The members of Division 3 learn that the kaiju has left the hospital and is heading toward an evacuated area. On the run, Ichikawa wonders how, why, and when Kafka became a kaiju. He also questions whether he's really a kaiju himself, but all doubts vanish when he looks back and sees Kafka's strange mutation while he eats a bird alive. Soon after, Kafka returns to his original kaiju form and tells Ichikawa he needs to pee but doesn't know where it will come from. The pee shoots out from his chest, leaving Kafka devastated over what he's become. He collapses on the ground and asks Ichikawa if he can still join the defense force, but Ichikawa quickly tells him he can't because they would kill him the moment they see him. Ichikawa tells Kafka he has bigger things to worry about and points him toward a cordon where they can stay out of sight, but Kafka senses the presence of a Yoju and hesitates. Mina gets a phone call about another kaiju's location and requests a car to follow Kafka while her bus heads to the new spot. Ichikawa urges Kafka to hurry, explaining that another kaiju means fewer people are looking for him. A little girl tries to save her mom who's trapped under a collapsed building. The mom tells her to run, but the girl refuses to leave without her. She tries to lift the heavy wall on her mom, but her strength isn't enough. The Yoju spots the girl and her mom, breaks the building more for a better view, and attempts to eat the girl alive, but Kafka shows up and punches the Yoju. Kafka tries to calm the little girl, but even just his appearance scares her, making it hard for him to connect with her through his dangerous kaiju smile. Ichikawa comes to Kafka's aid, talking to the little girl while Kafka lifts the heavy wall off her mom. The girl is worried that something's wrong with her unconscious mother, but Ichikawa reassures her that her mom will wake up once they get to the hospital. The Yoju comes back, and Kafka tells Ichikawa to help the mother and daughter get out of the building. Curiosity gets the better of Ichikawa, who asks what Kafka wants to do. Kafka clenches his fist and says he wants to punch the Yoju as hard as he can. Carrying the girl's mom on his back, Ichikawa holds the little girl, telling her to brace herself while they move back to give Kafka the space he needs. The Yoju opens its mouth wide enough to swallow Kafka whole, and Kafka gathers all his strength before he throws a heavy punch at the Yoju, shattering it into a million pieces and showering blood over himself. Ichikawa is shocked by what has happened and reminds Kafka not to punch a human like that. Kafka tries to talk to the little girl, but she hides from him, so he starts to walk away. The little girl stops him and thanks him, which makes Kafka remember when he had a similar bond with little Mina. Kafka resolves again that he doesn't have to give up on joining the defense force when he transforms his head back to normal, but Ichikawa says they need to leave since he's called an ambulance. Mina and her team members are confused by what they find at the kaiju location. She sees the little girl and asks her to tell her about the kaiju she saw, but the girl is too scared to think about it. Mina promises to kill all the kaiju, and the girl gains the courage to ask Mina if she'll spare the nice kaiju that saved her mother. 3 months after the incident, Kaiju number 8, the name given to Kafka's type of kaiju, hasn't been found, while the cleanup team watches on television. The captain of the cleanup team gives Ichikawa some letters, one for Ichikawa and another for Kafka. The cleanup team members worry that they will have to comfort Kafka like they do every year when the Defense Force exam results are released. Ichikawa confirms he passed the first round of his exam and offers to give Kafka his letter. On the way to the site, since Kafka went there early, Ichikawa checks Kafka's letter, and the team members think Kafka has passed based on Ichikawa's reaction. Ichikawa finds Kafka eating on the body of the kaiju they need to clean, and he looks like his kaiju self. Ichikawa scolds Kafka for being careless with his ugly transformation, knowing the other team members will show up soon. He tells Kafka to transform back to normal, and remembers how they fooled everyone 3 months ago by going back to the hospital when Kafka turned back to his normal self, claiming they fled when the kaiju appeared in their room. Kafka sees he has passed his exam but doesn't show too much excitement. He tells Ichikawa that he used to fail the second round. Ichikawa asks if Kafka will take the second round in his kaiju body. He warns Kafka that the officials at the venue will kill him immediately if he transforms into a kaiju in front of them, but Kafka is determined to take the exam anyway, since this is his last chance. Once Ichikawa leaves, Kafka expresses his gratitude for passing the first round and slaps himself to transform back to normal. 10 days later, Kafka and Ichikawa arrive at Tachikawa base for the second round of tests. Kafka tells an amazed Ichikawa that the base shares the site with the Self-Defense Force's garrison. They're chatting when other examinees show up, and a girl comes over, calling Kafka an old man. Kafka is offended, but the girl doesn't care because she just wants Kafka to park his car anywhere but lot 55, since 5 is her lucky number. When Kafka doesn't budge, the girl reveals a suit under her clothes and gathers enough strength to move the car, surprising Ichikawa and Kafka. The girl introduces herself as examinee 2016, Kikoru Shinomiya, whose hobby is hunting kaiju. She steps up to Kafka and asks if he realizes he smells like kaiju. Ichikawa steps between Kikoru and Kafka, saying they work at kaiju's disposal. Kikoru is surprised to see some disposal workers here for the Defense Force exams. Kafka adds to the surprise by lifting the company bus Kikoru threw earlier, and she wonders if he has a private suit like hers. Kafka introduces himself as Kikoru did, but Kikoru's butler steals the spotlight when he parks in lot 55. Kikoru thought the exam would just be a formality for her, but things are getting interesting with Kafka around. She exits with her butler, Sebasu. Ichikawa scolds Kafka for revealing his powers too soon. They also head into the building when some officers ask if everything is okay. Kafka is determined to make the defense force this time. Since the second round of exams includes fitness and aptitude tests, Kafka and Ichikawa decide to do their best in the fitness test, though they can't promise anything for the aptitude test. However, Kafka struggles to keep up with the competition and ends up placing 219 out of 225. Kikoru shows off her 5th place finish, and Kafka begs her to forget him and his name. Ichikawa praises Kafka for not using his powers, but Kafka already regrets that choice. Ichikawa explains that this year's candidates are pretty tough, and at the same time, Mina receives a report about the applicants. Hoshina, the vice captain, is surprised to see Mina interested in the applicants, attributing it to Kafka's profile being on the list. Ichikawa mentions candidates like Haruichi Izumo, Iharu Furuhashi, Aoi Kaguragi, and other applicants from neutralization colleges. He notes that many eyes are on Kikoru, who graduated from California neutralization at just 16. Kafka is shocked to learn Kikoru is that impressive, and when he touches her out of surprise, her bodyguards beat him up while the other examinees mock him. Ichikawa tells Kafka to cheer up after he yells back at Kikoru, claiming he'll show her, but recalls he might have lost his chance since he didn't do well on the fitness test. Ichikawa explains the aptitude test for the last 2 years involved kaiju disposal, which is why he part-timed in that area. The two eagerly arrive at the location for the second part of the test, but are stunned when Hoshina informs them that they'll need to find and neutralize kaiju. The other examinees, except Kafka and Ichikawa, are excited. Hoshina explains they won't send the candidates into the field empty-handed. They'll wear the Izumo Tech Gear, GX 4552. He says the Defense Force Kaiju combat suit is made from organic material taken from kaiju and enhances the wearer's combat power. Ichikawa is thrilled to see the suit meld with his body once he puts it on. The tech lady, Okanogi, who is with Hoshina, says she'll call out the unleashed combat power for everyone who has worn the suit. She states Ichikawa at 8%, Izumo at 18%, Ioi at 15%, Iharu at 14%, and to everyone's surprise, Kikoru at 46%. Hoshina remarks that trainees usually pull about 20% and thinks everyone is doing well this year. Just when Hoshina assumes no one will get 0%, Okanogi announces that Kafka is at 0%, showcasing his unique ability to lose when no one else has. Hoshina walks into the room filled with examinees and tells them they need to take down 1 Hanju and 36 Yoju for the test. He explains that these kaijus caused major destruction in Hachioji last year but were captured alive for training purposes. The examinees have to fight them using anti-kaiju weapons. Hoshina also explains that drones will track the examinees' actions, and if one of them is in danger, a shield will activate to protect them, but that means they've failed. Even though there's no guarantee they'll be okay, the examinees jump into the battleground right away. Kikoru shows off her skills as she leaps from wall to wall, taking down kaijus effortlessly, surprising both the examinees and the examiners. Kafka, on the other hand, drags his gun lazily behind Ichikawa, telling him not to fall behind. But when he finds out Mina is watching, he pushes through the pain of carrying the gun without any suit power. Ichikawa and Kafka realize that the defense force is more interested in how they handle the situation and help each other than just how many kaijus they kill. They decide that since neither of them has offensive abilities, they'll support those who are fighting. Spotting Izumo and Aiwi shooting at a kaiju, Kafka and Ichikawa jump in to assist. It doesn't take long for Ichikawa to recognize the type of kaiju they've worked with that kind during their time as kaiju disposals with the Ida cleaners before. Using what he learned back then, Kafka tosses a stun grenade at the kaiju and explains that it has poor eyesight but excellent hearing. If they can mess with its hearing, it'll be easier to kill. He advises Izumo to aim for the stomach, and when they do, they take down the kaiju, earning thanks from the other examinees and a raised eyebrow from Hoshina. Kafka feels like he can at least give it a try, so he races toward the next target with Ichikawa beside him, determined to do well with his knowledge of kaiju. Just then, a kaiju appears and knocks Kafka aside, a sign that higher powers are testing him. The tech lady notices abnormalities in Kafka's body, and Hoshina tells her to get the remote shield ready. Just when Kafka thinks he might fail, Kikoru takes out the Yoju and says nobody quits while she's on the battlefield. Kafka thanks her, but Kikoru is just glad to see him again. She keeps taking down kaiju so fast that even Izumo, Aoi, and Iharu can't keep up. Hoshina suggests Kafka drop out of the exam because they think his bones are broken and his organs are in trouble, but Kafka remembers this is his last chance to stand by Mina, and he can't let her see him give up. He digs deep, stands up, and his power level jumps from 0% to 0.01%, surprising everyone around him. Kafka decides to stick it out for the exam, and Hoshina lets him be, saying he'll activate the remote shield if he sees Kafka can't keep going. Kafka tells Ichikawa to go ahead since they agreed Ichikawa wouldn't wait for him if he fails like usual, but instead Ichikawa carries Kafka on his back and suggests they combine their powers, Ichikawa using his suit and Kafka applying his kaiju knowledge. Hoshina can't stop laughing at how ridiculous Ichikawa and Kafka look, which annoys even the tech lady. Ichikawa and Kafka want to catch up with Kikoru and help her, but she's too quick, outrunning Izuma, Aoi, and Iharu. Kikoru leaps from car to car, taking down the Yojis with a shot or two, leaving nothing for her teammates. Okanogi informs the operation room that Kikoru has eliminated all the Yoju in the Delta region and is heading for the Hanju. Kikoru throws a grenade at the Hanju, catching it off guard before jumping into its mouth and splitting it open with her legs. She fires into the Honju's mouth, finishing it off, which earns a smirk from Hoshina in the operation room. Okanogi announces the defeat of the Hanju, the end of the exam, and the withdrawal of the drones. Hoshina is still shocked by how quickly the exam ended compared to how long it took to set up. Kafka also complains about Kikoru's speed, and Ichikawa drops him, breaking their combination. Mina is impressed by Kikoru's success, and Hoshina notes it's thanks to her that nobody failed the exam and injuries are minimal. Kikoru looks up, hoping she was perfect for her dad. As she turns to laugh at Kafka for his ongoing weakness one more time, she notices movement behind her. A kaiju shoots her in the chest. Ichikawa and Kafka discuss Kikoru's strength and how she helped them get through the exam. Soon, they realize the kaijus they thought were dead are unexpectedly coming back to life. Kikoru steadies herself and heals the wounds in her chest, surprising the talking kaiju. She's shocked to see the Hanju she killed back alive, but believing she can fight, she stands up, and the talking kaiju shoots her multiple times. Okanogi hears Kikoru's screams in the operation room and reports that she can see damage to Kikoru's vitals. The operation room struggles to understand what's happening on the training grounds, but Okanogi explains that the strength of the Honju Kikoru defeated has risen to 6.4, meaning it's back alive and stronger. Mina announces that the examinees should evacuate the grounds to a safe spot while she and Hoshina come in. Kikoru refuses to evacuate because she wants to achieve perfection. She stands up again to attack the Hanju that the talking kaiju left behind, but the Hanju knocks Kikoru aside, and she realizes her own weakness. Kikoru is transported back to when she was at the top of the list of students accepted into Tokyo Neutralization Middle School. Unlike the many students around her, she had no one to congratulate her, except the butler who came to take her home. At home, her father doesn't celebrate with her. He believes that doing so will only lead to failure in the future. He tells Kikoru to be perfect for the nation's future and her late mother. His words motivate Kikoru to stand tall again, and she grabs her gun to shoot the Hanju, declaring she will be strong for the nation. She wants to be perfect for the sake of the country, but this only leads her to overwhelming pain. The Hanju grows horns and smashes Kikoru down. Hoshina and Mina enter the training grounds, and Okanogi informs them that she has seen the Hanju with its offensive uni-organ regenerated. She also mentions that Kikoru is nearby, injured. Mina and Hoshina continue running, hoping to reach her in time. Kikoru falls to her knees, apologizing for not being perfect as the Hanju readies its ultimate attack. However, Kafka appears beside her and reassures her that she did well by making it easier for the other examinees to escape. He transforms into a kaiju in front of her and deflects the Hanju's attack, promising to handle it now that he's there. Kikoru can't hide her surprise at Kafka's transformation. Ichikawa is worried about Kafka while the others evacuate, as he vanished the moment he heard Kikoru was in danger. Ichikawa decides to search for them himself because he knows Kafka won't hesitate to transform in situations like this, which could get him killed. Kafka begs Kikoru not to tell the defense force he's a kaiju, deflecting another attack from the Hanju. He temporarily excuses himself from Kikoru, saying he'll explain later but needs to defeat the Hanju first. Okanogi reports to Mina and Hoshina about another kaiju close to the Hanju, but they have no visual signal, much to Kafka's advantage, as he makes foolish decisions as a kaiju. Okanogi informs them that the new kaiju has a fortitude of 9.8, but they choose to interpret this as a signal problem, as otherwise, it would be the most powerful kaiju in history. Running out of time, Kafka decides to take out the kaiju with one punch. With one punch, the Hanju explodes into pieces all over the training grounds, with its blood spilling like rain. Kikoru watches in awe as Kafka defeats the Honju and a Yoju that attacks from behind. Kafka tells Kikoru not to endanger herself again, and as if on cue, Ichikawa smacks Kafka on the head for vanishing and transforming in such a place. They both get distracted when Kikoru collapses. Mina and Hoshina arrive at the scene of the Hanju's remains and are baffled by what they see. Hoshina notes it resembles the scene they witnessed 3 years ago and wonders if both are connected. Okanogi confirms the arrival of Ichikawa, Kafka, and Kikoru at the evacuation site, and they are relieved that everyone is okay. Mina orders for a unit to investigate and dispose of the remains at the training ground, while she and Hoshina take out the remaining Yojis. Kafka is in the hospital with Ichikawa, who is thankful that his injuries aren't worse. Ichikawa tells Kafka that Kikoru is also recovering well, receiving treatment with the best Defense Force tech, which makes Kafka a bit jealous. However, he thanks Ichikawa for encouraging him to retake the exam. Mina, who has been eavesdropping, enters the ward to thank Ichikawa and Kafka for rescuing Kikoru. Kafka avoids saying Mina's name, waiting until he becomes an officer. Hoshina meets with Kikoru to thank her for taking down the Hanju. Since she wants to protect Kafka, Hoshina agrees to take credit for defeating the Hanju. Meanwhile, the talking Hanju listens to the news in the restroom and feels disappointed to hear that there were 0 casualties at the training grounds. He gets a call and transforms into a human. The humanoid kaiju becomes the new cleaner among Ichikawa Ichikawa and Kafka's teammates. The wait for the result is driving Kafka crazy, especially now that he's finally found the courage to dream and hope. Ichikawa, who thought Kafka was cool at the hospital, now believes he must have been wrong, considering how Kafka can't seem to get himself together. The cleanup captain arrives with mail for Kafka and Ichikawa, and Kafka opens his letter with the hope that this time he'll be on the path to Mina. The induction ceremony for new Defense Force members takes place. Izuma and Aoi aren't surprised to see each other, but Izuma looks a bit disappointed when he notices Kafka isn't around. When Kikoru arrives, it distracts everyone, leading Izuma to tell Ayui that they need to compete for second place, though Ayui isn't really on board with that. Iharu and Ichikawa get acquainted, and Iharu asks about Kafka, but before Ichikawa can reply, Captain Mina walks in. Kikoru takes an oath for the 27 newbies accepted into the Force, and Mina thanks Kikoru for her bravery during the test. Kikoru knows deep down that Kafka is the one who truly saved her and defeated the kaiju during the test, and she's disappointed he isn't with them. She still has questions for him. When Kafka finally shows up, he lightens the mood by apologizing for interrupting the ceremony. During the selection process, the panel decided that Kafka failed both the fitness and aptitude tests, but Hoshina wants to take Kafka as a cadet in his platoon because he identified the weak points of the kaiju during the test and prioritized saving others over boosting his kill count. Plus, Hoshina thinks Kafka is great for comic relief. Mina informs the inductees that she told Kafka to sit out the induction since he isn't a full officer, but the new officers are thrilled that Kafka, the older guy, made the team. Hoshina asks Mina to give her speech, and she encourages the new officers to trust her even though danger is on the horizon, as they're starting to face kaijus with stronger fortitude and the ability to reproduce or revive. She assures them that while some may die, she'll do her best to protect everyone. Moved by her speech, Kafka inadvertently declares that he'll stand by Mina's side, calling her name, which lands him a punishment of 100 push-ups and some laughter from Hoshina. Aside from the comedy Kafka brings, Hoshina has decided to keep him close because when they encountered a kaiju with 9.8 fortitude during the test, they also stopped receiving Kafka's vitals. He hopes to figure out what makes him different, aside from his suit aptitude being 0. The officers count along with Kafka as he finishes his push-ups. Kikoru tells Kafka to come with her because they need to talk, making the others think Kikoru wants to confess her love. When Kafka resists, Kikoru kicks him in the face. Ichikawa, Kafka, and Kikoru sit in a booth at a restaurant, and Kikoru struggles to contain her shout when she realizes that Kafka turned into a kaiju after eating one. Kafka suggests they tell the Force about his situation. Maybe they can help him, but Kikoru advises against it. She warns that Kafka will just become a specimen, and his parts might even be used to create weapons for fighting kaiju. Kafka pleads with Kikoru to keep his secret, and she agrees, saying she'll kill him the moment he becomes a kaiju that harms humans. During fire training, Ichikawa sets a new personal best, hitting the targets and practicing what he's learned. Even Hoshina is impressed at how quickly Ichikawa has improved, noting that his unleashed power is now 18%. Iharu finishes his training faster than Ichikawa, with 20% unleashed power, and he's pleased to be ahead of him. There's also a rivalry between Aoi and Izuma, who have both unleashed 25%. Kikoru shows them all what real speed looks like by setting a new record at 55% unleashed combat power. True to his clumsy reputation, Kafka finishes training last at 1% unleashed power. Feeling good about his progress, Kafka chases Kikoru but is stopped by Hoshina, who warns him that he'll never make it as a full officer at this rate and could get fired in 3 months. Hoshina tells everyone to wrap things up with 10 laps around the ground, but when they complain, he increases it to 15. He also tells Okanogi that he's pleased with the healthy competition among the new officers that's leading to improvements. Iharu and Ichikawa argue over whose biceps are bigger, and Kafka tries to show off but struggles to hold his breath, exposing his big stomach. Aoi steps into the bath, quieting them down while Izuma smiles. They're all pretty comfortable in the water together. Kikoru and some other girls enter the female changing room and find Mina, who invites them in despite their hesitation. After Mina checks on Kikoru's health, Kikoru gathers the courage to ask what kind of exercises she does to get so strong. Mina offers to show Kikoru the basics, and Kikoru is really grateful. The boys decide to share why they joined the Force, and one common thread links them all: Captain Mina. When they ask Kafka to share his story and he mentions that Mina was his childhood friend, they want to hear more. They urge him to tell them everything about his childhood, and they end up overstaying in the water, passing out after their session, which disgusts Kikoru, who just came from her own bath. The new officers bond over training, eating, climbing walls, lifting weights, meeting Mina's tiger, morning routines, and even more training. Ichikawa continues to have Kafka's back. After a full day of training and a lot of burnout sessions, they end their day in the bath. Kafka works extra hard because it's the only way he can catch up with everyone else. Hoshina sees him and asks if he's working hard because of Mina since he was talking about her to everyone in the bath. Hoshina tells Kafka he won't let him have his vice captain position. He warns Kafka to stay away from others because anything can happen to anyone at any time. Just then, an alarm sounds, waking the new officers and alerting them to the presence of a kaiju. Hoshina tells Kafka that it's time for their first mission. In the operation room, Okanogi informs Mina that evacuation started almost 30 minutes ago, and since they'll be working with the JSDF on this mission, a command post for a JSDF artillery regiment is being set up at the Leon Mall parking lot. Mina inquires about the Hanju, and Okanogi suggests it might have surfaced because it's in its breeding phase. Mina states she'll handle the Hanju herself and selects Sector Echo as the sniper point. She instructs the other platoons to focus on neutralizing the Yojis, and the mission officially kicks off. Kikoru is seated across from Kafka in the vehicle, still having trouble believing he's Kaiju number 8, but she hopes he won't let her down. Unfortunately, Kafka is full of disappointments, and starts off with his urge to throw up from eating too much out of nervousness. Once on the battlefield, Hoshina takes the time to explain the mission and everyone's roles. He mentions that Mina's unit will deal with the Hanju, but notes the serious issue of the many Yoju it's creating. He clarifies that the neutralization area is intentionally kept clear of critical infrastructure and transport routes, emphasizing that the officers' defense will impact the city's damage and rebuilding time. He explains that recruits are held back, making them the last line of defense. When no one raises any questions, Okanogi announces that Mina will reach her position in 8 minutes. Kafka talks with Ichikawa, and they encourage each other. Ichikawa feels relieved to see Kafka is nervous yet excited. As a Yoju appears in Sector Echo, Kafka urges Kikoru to hurry. The officers leap down walls, but because this inexperienced officer hasn't released enough power yet, he carefully climbs down instead to avoid injuring himself. The JSDF uses numerous fire shots to lure the Hanju into Sector Bravo, where Mina has now taken her position. Hoshina hopes the new recruits will impress their superiors with their strength during this mission. Kafka strangely feels calm as they confront the Yoju, but the creature easily kicks him away since his unleashed power is only 1%. Kikoru tells Kafka to stay in the back, while the superiors question why they have to babysit the recruits. Kikoru does not hesitate to show the superiors they are the ones in need of babysitting by accurately shooting the Yoju without knowing their weak points. Kafka praises Kikoru for her skills, causing her heart rate to rise, but she brushes it off and keeps shooting. Iharu, Ichikawa, Izuma, and Aoi also stay sharp in their positions. Iharu takes down a Yoju after several shots, but when he turns to brag to Ichikawa, he is shocked to see Ichikawa neutralize a Yoju himself with a single shot. Ichikawa explains that he used freeze-round bullets because they fit his style better. Ichikawa is giving it his all because he doesn't want his senpai, Kafka, to transform to beat the Kaijus. Izuma shoots down a pole to slow the fast-moving Yoju, while Aoi takes out 6 Yoju with Izuma's help. The senior officers suddenly feel insecure, and their platoon leader, Nakanoshima, reminds them that Hoshina said the new recruits are stronger than the regular ones from previous years. Not only that, but those at the front lines also inspire others to step up their game. However, Nakanoshima finds himself captivated by the appearance of the new recruits. Kafka listens to Okanogi's reports and notices that even Ichikawa is giving his best in the battle. Feeling frustrated that he's slowing things down, Kafka wonders how he can help the hunting officers. He remembers that the weak points of the Yoju haven't been discovered yet. Using his experience with dissecting kaiju, Kafka starts working on a Yoju corpse and discovers that the core is located at the base of its neck. He also finds that the Yoju have reproductive organs that can produce new Yojus even after they die, as long as those organs remain intact. He shares this finding with Hoshina, who is observing from a higher vantage point. Hoshina praises Kafka for the information, and Okanogi relays it to everyone on the battlefield. Kafka rushes out to neutralize the Yoju corpses, feeling pleased that he's contributing to the defense. An explosion interrupts him, but he realizes this is just the groundwork for Mina's upcoming attack on the Hanju. The JSDF officers pin the Hanju down by shooting its legs, and Mina informs Okanogi that she's ready. He gives her the go-ahead to fire. Mina channels 96% power through her gun, preparing to shoot as she stomps on the ground. Hoshina tells Kafka to observe closely as Mina takes her first shot, which goes straight through the Hanju. Mina fires again, causing the Hanju's vital signs to vanish, leading to its collapse. With Okanogi's approval, Mina prepares for a third shot, which Okanogi confirms delivers critical damage, disabling all movement and strength. So, Okanogi is caught off guard when Mina says she's ready for a fourth shot. Mina thanks the fourth shot, leaving Kafka intrigued. Hoshina asks Kafka if he feels like giving up, saying that standing by Mina means he has to possess that level of strength. He admits he doesn't have the strength for large kaiju battles, but can handle the smaller ones faster than Mina can. He demonstrates this when a Yoju appears behind him, and he swiftly takes it down with a katana before Kafka can fully register what's happening. Hoshina explains that the captain and vice captain are the strongest in their unit, so they have weapons tailored to their combat style. Mina tells Hoshina that the Hanju is down, but both know this is just the beginning because all the Yojis will emerge from the Hanju's corpse. The swarm of Yojis boosts the spirits of the senior officers, and Nakanoshima encourages the new recruits to keep fighting. Okanogi worries about the newcomers, but everyone knows they're going to push on. Hoshina hopes this mission helps the new recruits rise to new levels, especially for Kikoru and Ichikawa. Ichikawa takes out the last Yoju in his area, which makes Iharu feel a twinge of jealousy. Ichikawa suggests they both return to the front lines, but as they run, they stumble upon a kaiju cleaner who's grumbling about someone who removed the reproductive organs he had implanted in the Yojus. He turns to Ichikawa and Iharu to ask if they know anything. The captain of the cleaners is searching for the new guy while the others are watching the Honju scene with binoculars. They understand why almost every cleaner in Tokyo was called out. They think the new guy has probably holed up in a bathroom like usual, and nobody seems worried. The cleaner that Ichikawa and Iharu ran into points at Iharu, saying he will take a sample of the defense force home, even if he can't finish his mission. Suddenly, something strikes Iharu close to his chest, and the cleaner transforms into a kaiju. Ichikawa and Iharu remember that this is the kaiju that showed up during their test. Ichikawa tries to tell platoon leader Ikarugi that they've encountered a humanoid kaiju, but when he gets no response, the humanoid kaiju claims the area is completely undetectable from the outside world. It's a trap he set to hide from humans and to hunt them. The kaiju attacks Ichikawa in the arm and leg, and Ichikawa is shocked that the attacks penetrate his combat suit. He recalls Kikoru's comment about the kaiju looking like it's using magic. In reality, it prepares for every attack, and its strikes can be dodged. Ichikawa successfully dodges the next attack, surprising Iharu. Ichikawa tells Iharu to run away and call in the kaiju, but Iharu wonders why he should let Ichikawa protect him. Ichikawa doesn't have to explain, as the kaiju points at Iharu again, leading Ichikawa to jump in and save Iharu from taking too much damage. Although Iharu's left arm takes the brunt of the attack, Ichikawa begs Iharu to leave and call for help. With no other option, Iharu stands up and runs away like a scared coward. Ichikawa knows he has no chance against the kaiju since even Kikoru couldn't handle him, but he wants to buy as much time as possible for Iharu to escape and come back. Iharu is still trying to figure out what changed for Ichikawa between yesterday and today. He stumbles and almost falls while running, forcing him to stop. He wonders why he always needs someone to save him, like Mina did when he was younger. He feels lost in how to get stronger, and remembers Hoshina saying that people struggle to progress from 20 to 30% unleashed power. Iharu has been stuck at 20% for 2 weeks while Ichikawa has surpassed him effortlessly. He stands up and admits he hates it all. Ichikawa keeps shooting at the kaiju until it disappears and reappears next to him. The kaiju is impressed that Ichikawa knows a few things about him, but reveals that Ichikawa knows very little by revealing more weaknesses for his attack. Ichikawa is stunned. Iharu jumps in just in time to save Ichikawa. The kaiju tells them that no one can escape his trap without his permission, which means Iharu can't get help even if he tries. Iharu vows to fight alongside Ichikawa with the little strength he has left. Ichikawa takes the lead in the fight against the kaiju, giving Iharu a chance to use a conductor round bullet, making it harder for the kaiju to move. When the kaiju attacks Iharu this time, he dodges it. Iharu fires his conduction bullet again, creating an opening for Ichikawa, who unleashes his full combat power against the kaiju. But once he stops shooting, he realizes the kaiju has built a wall of Yoju corpses for protection. The kaiju steps out from the pile of bodies, unharmed, and fires multiple shots at Ichikawa, leaving Iharu in shock. Ikaruga informs Hoshina that they've lost all communication and vital signals from Iharu and Ichikawa. Kikoru manages to reach Kafka and tells him that the kaiju from their exam is there. Iharu tries to prevent the kaiju from attacking the already injured Ichikawa, who can't move as well as he used to, but this puts Iharu in harm's way. Ichikawa struggles to move or heal his injuries, but it's tough, and the kaiju strikes him again. Iharu gathers his strength to pick up his gun and protect Ichikawa, because he now believes that Ichikawa could become a captain someday. However, when he pulls the trigger, he realizes his gun is empty. The kaiju decides to deal with Iharu first, having no use for him anymore, and Iharu desperately prays for someone to save Ichikawa. Just then, Kafka shows up in his kaiju form. Kafka delivers a punch so powerful that it decapitates the kaiju, leaving Iharu stunned to see another humanoid kaiju. Kafka carries Ichikawa to safety and tells him to use his combat suit to close his wounds, but not without cracking a joke like a broke comedian. Ichikawa is concerned that he's so weak, Kafka has to turn into a kaiju again. He warns Kafka to be careful. Kafka reassures Ichikawa not to worry, promising to handle the kaiju, but Ichikawa feels uneasy about the situation. The kaiju successfully shoots Kafka through his kaiju form, and Ichikawa yells at Kafka to run away when he sees the kaiju open its pores again, ready to take him out. Iharu is shocked to realize the kaiju wasn't really serious about fighting. Kafka eases Ichikawa's fears when he strikes the kaiju so hard it attempts to run into the wall of corpses again. Kafka gives the kaiju no chance to breathe, relentlessly punching it and preventing its escape. With a hit to the kaiju's torso, Kafka exposes its core. Kikoru worries about Kafka since she transformed in front of him, uncertain about how far he's willing to go. Kafka's defeat of the kaiju sets off the trap it created, and using the officers as a distraction, he disappears. Kafka figures he needs to escape, leaping away from the scene, but Hoshina catches up with him. Hoshina announces he's made contact with Kaiju No 8 and asks for his limiter to be taken off, while Kafka realizes Hoshina wasn't joking when he said he was better with smaller kaiju. Ichikawa and Kikoru are now anxious about Kafka since Hoshina has made that connection. Hoshina's combat power is unleashed at 92%, and he states he will neutralize Kaiju No 8. Kafka is trying to figure out how to fight Hoshina since he can't use his super strong fists against the vice captain. Hoshina, on the other hand, acts quickly, slashing at Kafka with his katana and feeling satisfied that his method worked. Kafka tries to dodge Hoshina's attacks, but he realizes that because Hoshina is so fast and swings his weapon from both sides, he can't harden his body quickly enough to defend against them. Kafka is fascinated by Hoshina's movements and strikes, knowing he has to be careful or he won't be able to keep up with Hoshina's speed even in his humanoid form. Hoshina climbs walls and doesn't let up with his attacks until he finds Kafka's core. Kafka regenerates himself, understanding that he can't keep doing this because it takes a lot of stamina, but Hoshina doesn't care and rushes at him anyway. With just a little time to brace himself for the next strike, Hoshina wonders why he feels something strange during the fight, but he brushes it off and launches an invisible attack before charging at Kafka, who now realizes that the double attack was a distraction. Hoshina had planned a triple strike. Thanks to Kafka's quick thinking, he blocks the third attack aimed at his core and instead pushes the blade away from Hoshina, using the opportunity to escape. Hoshina is bummed that he let Kaiju No 8 get away but makes the report regardless. Kikoru is unsure if she can trust Kafka, who is Kaiju No 8, and just then, he shows up. Kikoru is excited to see Kafka, though she pretends to be unconcerned. The loser human but hero Kaiju says he wants to check on Ichikawa and Iharu, but Kikoru stops him, explaining they'll be fine since the defense force is now using Kaiju regeneration in their tech. She tells Kafka to focus on himself because after connecting with Hoshina, they might find clues leading to Kafka. Mina catches Hoshina in an embarrassing moment and asks him about Kaiju No 8. Hoshina suspects that the Kaiju is a Daikaiju, and Mina points out that would be the first since Fukuoka 5 years ago. Hoshina notes that at least there have been no human casualties since Kaiju No 8 appeared, and he suspects the strange feeling he had during their fight was due to the fact that Kaiju No 8 didn't attack him directly. Additionally, Hoshina felt as if he was fighting a human rather than a Kaiju. Mina tells Hoshina not to worry because no matter the type of Kaiju, their job is to neutralize it. She tells him to rest while she takes over. However, Ikaruga's report comes in, stating that the Kaiju that attacked Ichikawa and Iharu first appeared in human form. This Kaiju is called Kaiju No 9, and while on his way, he attacks a human and uses his car to flee. Ichikawa wakes up in the hospital and thanks Kafka for saving him and Iharu, but Kafka and Kikoru just stare at him without responding. Ichikawa realizes Iharu is also in the same room, and Iharu asks why Ichikawa is thanking Kafka when it was Kaiju No 8 that saved them. Kikoru explains that Kafka found the neutralization points on the Kaijus, and Iharu accepts this explanation, then praises Kaiju No 8 for being so cool, which makes the older gentleman blush. Kikoru then playfully punches Kafka, wiping away his blush, teasing him for looking dumb as always. After Ichikawa and Iharu leave the hospital, a party is thrown to celebrate them and the completion of their first mission. The officers are treated to a course of A6 grade marbled Japanese black Wagyu beef, courtesy of Izumo, the son of Izumo Technologies, the company that makes the Defense Force combat suits. Hoshina congratulates everyone on completing their first mission successfully and encourages them to have fun. Ichikawa is thrilled to see everyone happy. He thanks Hoshina for organizing the party, but Hoshina warns him not to get too relaxed just yet because things are about to get interesting. As if on cue, the atmosphere shifts as the officers start arguing about each other's weaknesses, who is better, and who helped or hindered during the mission. Ichikawa is surprised to see Kafka joining in the debates. All around him, officers are discussing the mission, and Hoshina points out that everyone has seen their shortcomings and will never stop talking about it because they all want to improve. Okanogi and Hoshina are enjoying themselves since the arguments after the first mission have become a yearly tradition. Outside the restaurant, Dojima, the chef, chats with Izumo and asks about his dad, but Izumo mentions he hasn't spoken to him since. Just then, Aoi walks by but pretends he didn't hear anything and heads to the bathroom. Izumo thanks Dojima for the delicious meal. Hoshina interrupts the argument with an announcement. He calls out Kafka's name and shares the news that Kafka has been promoted to full officer for saving many lives during the mission. Everyone is happy for Kafka, including Aoi and Izumo. Kafka takes his oath in Mina's office, and she tells him not to get too excited since he still has a long way to go before fighting alongside her. So excited that he recalls their promise, he addresses her by her name again, and she punishes him with 50 push-ups. Mina explains that Hoshina recommended him for the officer position, and hopes he meets Hoshina's expectations. She also mentions that she needs to present the reports of number 8 and number 9 at HQ. After studying late into the night again, Kafka decides it's time to rest before Hoshina catches him and gives him another lecture. When he steps out, he notices the training room lights are still on, and sees Hoshina doing mental imagery training, reenacting his fight with Kaiju No 8. Hoshina moves with sharp precision, almost like he's not human. Kafka drops to the ground in realization, and Hoshina spots him. Hoshina explains that he's working on a strategy to take down No 8 in one go when he encounters it again. Kafka gets scared, and Hoshina admits he's training because he knows the officers can't handle No 9 and No 8, so he'll have to take them out himself. Kafka Kafka promises to be useful in battle, and Hoshina says he'll give Kafka 1% of his expectations before returning to the office. But what they don't know is that some kaijus with a master are about to descend from the sky. Hoshina is reading reports about Kaiju No 8, which he still feels fights like a human. He can't shake the fact that No 9 disguises itself and talks like a human too. He wonders what's happened to the kaijas. Outside, Kafka downs his canned drink and decides he won't let Hoshina down, since he now has 1% of his expectations. He tosses the can aside and heads back inside to sleep, but is interrupted by the sound of chaos outside. Kafka watches as fire engulfs different parts of the Tachikawa base from above, waking up even the new recruits, who are confused about what's happening. Hoshina asks for an update from the operation room, and Okanogi reports that dozens of kaiju are in the base, with fortitude levels of 6.1, 6.3, 6.2, and 6.5, and every single kaiju is of Hanju class. Hoshina announces he'll give orders since Mina isn't in the base. He tells the officers on duty to take positions at the battle stations and requests that off-duty officers be called in. Given that there are no reports of damage outside the base, Hoshina wonders if the kaiju are targeting the base itself. Kafka is still trying to figure out what's going on, because seeing wyvern-type kaijus attacking the base in a group indicates something isn't right. Hoshina commands those who can use rifles to gather at the base's center, lure the kaijus there, and take them down. Kafka calls Hoshina, and they both agree that the only reason the kaijus have grouped up is that they have an intelligent leader commanding them. Hoshina ends the call when they come across the leader kaiju, with Okanogi reporting its fortitude is 8.3, putting it in the Daikaiju class. The kaiju asks Hoshina if he's the strongest in the base, to which Hoshina affirms, as the captain is not around. Hoshina tells Ikaruga to take charge of defeating the Yojus since he wants to deal with the Honju himself. The kaiju attacks Hoshina, but he dodges, and the kaiju gets excited to start Hoshina's annihilation since he sees him as prey. The kaiju lets out a roar, calling the nearby Yojus to confirm that their target is the base. The kaiju tries to punch Hoshina, who barely escapes it but realizes that if one punch lands, he's a goner. Hoshina takes the fight seriously, leaping at the kaiju while dodging its punches. However, his katana barely scratches its skin, indicating it's tougher than Kaiju No 8's. Ikarugi tells his men to fall back and switch to oscillator rounds because they can't take down the Yoju head-on. Kafka, returning after running off like a coward, tells the officers to aim for the backs of the Yojus since they're similar to those reported in 03. He explains that while the front of the Yoju is easy to hit in flight, the skin on the back is thinner, and the core is on that side too. Grateful for the useful information from the lazy guy, Ikarugi instructs the officers to work together to take down the Yoju. Aoi and Izumo team up, with Aoi saying he'll distract the Yoju from the front while Izumo targets the back. Aoi shoots the Yoju's leg to draw its attention while Izumo powers up to attack from behind, but just as he pulls the trigger, another Yoju appears to save its buddy from Izumo's attack. The guys are shocked that the Yojus are working together. Everyone returns with the same report about their inability to attack the Yoju's backs because another Yoju keeps coming to their aid. In the midst of the confusion, Kikoru steps up and says there's another way. She zips past the guys like lightning and pierces through the front armor of the Yoju, surprising everyone with her custom-made weapon. A few days ago, Mina and Hoshina made an exception for Kikoru and crafted a custom weapon for her because she's the third strongest officer on the base. This is the weapon Kikoru uses to take down the Yojus that are giving the other officers a hard time since she can slice right through their thick skin. Her weapon was made from the uni-organ of a Hanju that was neutralized in Shinagawa 2 years ago. Kikoru generates a shockwave behind her with her weapon and slashes a Yoju using the number 1 squadron technique, Falling Thunder. She moves on to another Yoju and unleashes a frontal shockwave on impact with the number 2 technique, Water Skimmer. Iharu and Ichikawa are impressed just watching her, and Ichikawa says Kikoru's weapon suits her beyond her expectations. A Yoju comes from above, but Ichikawa takes it down with frozen rounds, impressing Kikoru. Kikoru finishes off the Yoju with her third technique, Half Moon. She decides to team up with Ichikawa to eliminate the Yojus, while Aoi and Izumo agree to attack from behind when the initial duo has them distracted. Hoshina is glad Kikoru has managed to control the Yojus, but he worries about the kaiju he's fighting because he can see how strong it is. He also notices the kaiju seems to be enjoying the fight, which isn't something kaijus are supposed to feel. He flies back to lure the kaiju into the training ground, but is let down when the kaiju breaks through the expensive gates. The kaiju comments that it's impressed by Hoshina's fighting style since most kaijus can't match him. The kaiju throws a heavy punch at Hoshina that even scares Okanogi in the operation room, but Hoshina apologizes for breaking protocol since he knows he can't hurt anyone in the training area, and he unleashes his full power. He also slashes the kaiju's arm because he's ready to neutralize it. To save Minaze, one of the officers, Kafka has no choice but to transform his legs, feeling relieved that she thinks he has finally learned to use his combat suit. Hikaru saves both Minase and Kafka from a Yoju's attack, and Ichikawa encourages Kafka to trust them instead of taking unnecessary risks. Hikaru tells Minase and Kafka to help the wounded while they distract the Yojus. Minase and Kafka watch their friends fight and are genuinely impressed. Okanogi announces that Nakanoshima and Abina's units have arrived to support the battle. Kafka feels relieved that they've started to take charge of the battle, even with the captain missing. He tells Minaze they should help the wounded quickly. Hoshina tells the kaiju kaiju that it picked a fight with the wrong people and begins slicing through the tiny gaps in the kaiju's exoskeleton, causing more damage than the kaiju expected. The kaiju feels the battle isn't fun this way since it knows what Hoshina's next move will be, but it couldn't be more mistaken. Hoshina uses his sword techniques, Cross Slasher and Wild Slasher, to attack, but the kaiju regenerates quickly, excited that the fight isn't easy anymore. The kaiju says it enjoys battling a rival as they move at nearly the same speed, but Hoshina uses that to reveal the kaiju's core. Hoshina catches the kaiju with his 8-fold slasher, and the people in the operation room rejoice. However, the celebration is short-lived because the kaiju regenerates and gets even bigger. Kafka's detection abilities activate without his transformation. The kaiju releases steam within the training grounds, and Okanogi announces that the kaiju has a fortitude of 9.0. The kaiju screams into the sky. Everyone in the operations room knows that Hoshina struggles with kaijus as massive as the one now standing in front of him. Like he once told Kafka, the ugly loser, he's only good with smaller kaijus. Kafka finds it hard to stay still next to Minase due to his kaiju detection skills and the fact that the vice captain is in danger, so he bolts off like he doesn't know what else to do. The kaiju swings a punch that slams into the ground, but Hoshina is quick enough to dodge and leaps onto the kaiju's back with his katana, ready to use his third fighting style, Return Slasher. He slashes the kaiju near the neck, jumps to the next building, then jumps back to cut across its thighs. The kaiju roars, digs into the ground, and throws a punch at Hoshina, claiming his speed won't save him. Hoshina seems unfazed as he keeps jumping from building to building, slashing the kaiju whenever he can. Okanogi is shocked that Hoshina hasn't stopped fighting the kaiju after its unexpected transformation, but Hoshina appears to be running out of time. Even though he despises giant kaijus, he plans to use his speed to reach the core at the back of the kaiju, but his suit is nearing its limits. Hoshina decides he needs to make the most of the last minute he has, even though Okanogi advises him to shut down his unleashed power. The kaiju doesn't give him enough time to think or communicate before launching some self-destructing Yojis at him. Hoshina seizes the opportunity to enter one of the buildings and plan his attack. He jumps out, ready to use style number 6, but the kaiju has more eyes than Hoshina anticipated and smashes him into a wall. The suit disengages from maximum release, and Okanogi screams Hoshina's name, fearing he's dead. Unfortunately, they get no response from him, and their worry intensifies. But moments later, remembering his father's advice to give up, Hoshina smiles and declares he's not dead. He stands up, now worried he no longer has maximum release. On Hoshina's request, Okanogi explains that the civilians outside have almost been fully evacuated, while the officers have control over the Yoju in the base. Hoshina resolves to keep fighting to the end, but Okanogi isn't convinced. No one can persuade Hoshina to give up, unlike Kafka, who doesn't need any discouragement before throwing in the towel. Hoshina jumps at the kaiju and uses his first style to slash it, but as soon as the kaiju regenerates, something clicks in its head. Hoshina realizes he can't defeat the kaiju with his katana, a fact he knew from the start. His father, his first boss, and others have told Hoshina to give up because he doesn't unleash high combat power with guns. The kaiju's taunt doesn't faze Hoshina because, when he decided to team up with Mina, she never told him to give up. She asked him to work with her for the same reason others wanted him to quit, because he's a blade specialist. Hoshina is ready to fight the kaiju because Mina asked him to clear a path for her, and at this critical moment, she left him in charge of the base. It's his job to protect the base and everyone there, even if it costs him his life. He climbs onto the kaiju and starts using his slashing techniques from number 1. After dealing some damage, he jumps off and returns with another style, trying to inflict as many injuries on the kaiju as he can. But just as he's about to use number 6, the kaiju grabs him and squeezes him in its hand. Kafka, who's at the training ground, screams when he sees this. Hoshina coughs up blood from the pain the kaiju is causing him, and Kafka can't resist the urge to transform into his kaiju form anymore, despite Ichikawa warning him not to. The loser thinks he's clever for prioritizing his comrade's life, but Mina shows up and beats him to it. Kafka stops in his tracks, and Hoshina tells the kaiju that he has won the fight just before Mina's bullet strikes it, making the kaiju drop Hoshina from its hand. Mina apologizes to Okanogi for skipping protocols since it's an emergency, and she doesn't hesitate to pull the trigger at the kaiju, which now has its eye on her. A wound appears on the kaiju's arm, and it lets out a loud cry, collapsing the building where Mina is and forcing her to change positions. The kaiju takes this opportunity to regenerate. Okanogi quickly tells Mina, who is now in a different spot with her tiger by her side, that the kaiju's core is located around the 4th to 6th thoracic vertebrae, as shown on the monitor in the operation room. Hoshina realizes that the kaiju isn't exactly an easy target and unleashes 63% of his combat power. At this point, Okanogi thinks Hoshina is crazy as he slashes at the kaiju's legs multiple times to hinder its movement because his suit has already reached its limits. Hoshina's methods aren't very effective since the kaiju regenerates as quickly as it gets hurt. He wonders what he can do with his limited strength, and suddenly, Kikoru comes to the rescue with her large axe weapon. However, instead of wounding the kaiju, the strength of its skin sends her and her weapon flying back. Kikoru is disappointed that she's not strong enough to hurt the kaiju, but Hoshina tells her to wait until he can break through the kaiju's hard shell. Hoshina stands up and does a good job slashing through the kaiju's leg. Kikoru doesn't waste any time as she swings her axe into the exposed area and successfully cuts off the kaiju's leg, causing the kaiju to feel immense pain and become momentarily helpless. Kikoru's suit also reaches its limit, and Hoshina smiles, recognizing that Kikoru has done her best. Mina takes the chance to shoot the kaiju again, and this time, she exposes its core. As Mina loads her last bullet for another attack, some Yojus try to assault her, but they're taken out by the arrival of other officers. Nakanoshima and Ibina apologize to Mina for their late arrival at the training ground, and with their units, following Hoshina's instructions, they stop the Yojus and attack the kaiju, giving it no time to regenerate. Hoshina takes on the job of distracting the kaiju by slashing at various parts of its body, from the arm to the thighs and legs. The kaiju reacts to the pain by smashing different buildings. Kafka, using his meager 1% power, shoots at any opportunity he gets. Hoshina is determined to make his mark in this battle, so he keeps slicing, urging himself to move within the 5 seconds he has left. When the kaiju opens its mouth and stomps its legs to swallow Hoshina, Mina thanks him for his help and for being her vice captain. She unleashes her full combat power of 96%, carries her gun, and without wasting time, takes the last shot. Hoshina falls to the ground, smiling at the foolish kaiju for picking a fight with the wrong people. The kaiju cries out as the bullet hits, scattering into many pieces around the training ground. The peace at the base is almost tangible until Okanogi announces that the kaiju is down, prompting joyful sighs from everyone in the operation room. Izumo and Aoi bump fists, grateful to have survived, while Iharu screams joyfully into the sky. Mina steps away from her position with her gun and her tiger, and the officers try to help each other, especially the wounded. Hoshina approaches Kikoru and pulls her up. When Mina reaches them, they salute each other in respect for their hard-fought victory. This scene brings tears to Kafka's eyes as he thinks about how right he was to dream of joining the defense force since childhood, because he wants to stand with them in the future. Ichikawa tells Kafka that his face is a mess, and Kafka frowns, asking why he would spoil such an emotional moment. Ichikawa reminds him to focus on doing their best instead of crying like babies. Hoshina tells Kikoru that he and the captain will handle the remaining Yojus, but Mina cuts him off with a hit on the head, telling him to get some rest. Nakanoshima also stops Mina from getting involved in the cleanup, saying she needs rest too because her suit is at 1% before overheating. Ebina insists they will manage the Yojus, but Mina isn't listening. Mina's tiger seems to sense something amiss as it looks into the sky and growls, while Kafka laughs like a comedian whose jokes aren't landing. Soon, everyone turns their gaze upward and realizes the battle is far from over. A Yoju forms a large ball with the bodies of numerous Yojus in the sky, and Hoshina realizes the kaiju's last cry before neutralization wasn't one of death. Okanogi explains that the energy level of the massive ball keeps rising, interpreting it as an ultra-massive Yoju bomb, with an estimated blast impact equal to 20 kilotons of TNT about to hit them. The helpless kaiju calls out to Hoshina, saying the battle is a draw. The ever-foolish Kafka runs in front of everyone toward the upcoming nuclear bomb. Hoshina chases after him, telling him to come back because there's nothing he can do. However, unable to catch up to Kafka, Hoshina wonders how Kafka's 1% can make him run so fast. Okanogi confirms another kaiju is in the base with a strength of 9.8, belonging to kaiju number 8. That's when everyone realizes Kafka is kaiju number 8. Hoshina feels disappointed in himself for caring about Kafka so much that he didn't realize he was kaiju no 8. In his thoughts, Kafka apologizes to Hoshina and everyone for lying to them. He feels sorry for Kikoru and Ichikawa for keeping his secret all this time, and for Mina, whom he can no longer join due to his revelation. Kafka reflects on how hard everyone has fought in this battle, deciding he can't be the only one putting his safety first. He opens some parts of his legs and, like a rocket, flies into the sky. Focused on the fact that he's an officer in the Defense Force and Division 3, Kafka pushes the nuclear bomb high into the sky to minimize its impact on the city. When Kafka lands back at the base, Mina tells everyone to stay down with their shields on max. The nuclear bomb detonates, but Kafka protects everyone in the base with his kaiju powers. However, the training grounds are severely damaged. When Calm finally returns, Mina and the other officers aim their guns at Kafka and arrest him. The Defense Force directors hold a meeting to discuss what to do about Kaiju no 8, which was discovered within their ranks. Deputy Director Keiji Itami is shocked that a Daikaiju was right under their noses, and he insists they need to handle it immediately. One director suggests reporting the situation to the media, but Chief of Staff Juzo Nogizaka believes they should keep it under wraps because he's heard a country is experimenting with kaiju to human tissue transplants. Keiji proposes secretly disposing of the kaiju and using its body for weapons, but another suggests considering it as a living weapon. Director General Isao Shinomiya declares that the discussion isn't getting them anywhere, so they should bring in the kaiju first and decide later. He orders the 3rd Division to send Kaiju no 8 to headquarters. In the operation room, the operators inform Keiji that Kaiju number 8 is stable and showing no signs of transforming. Kafka is restrained in a seat, and and isolated in a room, monitored from the operation room. He wonders what's going to happen to him now that he's captured, recalling that Kikoru once told him powerful kaiju get killed, and their parts are turned into weapons. Kafka feels disappointed with his situation, as he had just taken a step forward, and wonders how angry Mina is. As if reading his thoughts, Mina enters the isolation room, with some other officers and the vice captain, saying it's time to take Kafka to HQ's facilities. Kafka holds back from calling her name, but when he tries to talk to Hoshina, Hoshina tells him to speak no words. Hoshina orders him to stand up as soon as the restraints are off, and silently, they all exit the facility. Kafka concludes they're not talking to him because he kept a big secret from them. The entire 3rd Division stands outside as Kafka and the others emerge from the facility. Nakanoshima informs Mina that the security detail is ready to escort Kafka to HQ. As Kafka walks past them, he feels disappointed in himself and struggles to look Ichikawa in the face after everything the boy has done for him. He steps into the waiting van, believing it's all over, until Ichikawa steps out from the line behind him and shouts that he believes Kafka will overcome this situation and come back to them. Inside the van, Mina tells Kafka that Ichikawa will be punished for speaking out of turn. She also mentions there are no cameras in the van, which means she can speak freely. Mina tells Kafka that when he jumped out to save them during the incident, she was surprised to see he was a kaiju, but she also knew it was typical of him to save everyone. She says they're writing reports to prove Kafka is human because they think they can save him that way. They also plan to write a report on everything he did to help the force as an officer. After saying all this, she asks him to sit down. Mina begins reading the arrest order to send Kafka to the Ariake Maritime Base, but Kafka asks her if he still has a chance to fight beside her, and Mina says yes. She adds that she'll keep waiting for him, which makes Kafka cry, feeling like a useless loser. As the van drives away from the base, Hoshina realizes that Kafka is an idiot, but he still has the whole division salute. Keiji asks what Hoshina is doing, and Hoshina replies that he's honoring the captain, Mina. Keiji comments that it better be true, as no one should salute a kaiju. At the maritime base, bulkheads 23 to 21 are sealed, and Kafka is locked in another isolation room, strapped to a seat. Days later, Aoi, Izumo, Ichikawa, Iharu, and Minaze are all feeling down in the base. Iharu tries to lighten things up with a joke about Kafka, but it only falls flat. Minaze reminds them that Kafka saved her life, found the kaiju's weak points, and made training enjoyable. Iharu agrees that Kafka saved his life too. Aoi points out that they have no control over the current situation, and that only the Neutralization Bureau does. Izumo explains how dangerous things are now since a human has turned into a kaiju. If the world hears about it, every human will panic, wondering if the next person they meet is a kaiju or human, so it's too overwhelming for them to act. Okanogi walks into Mina's office, and she asks her to gather some files about Kafka. Mina wants to know if Okanogi can handle it, and she confirms that she can. Ibina reports to Hoshina that they've cleared all the destroyed cars, and Hoshina thanks him. Ibina asks if Hoshina is worried about Kafka's fate, but instead of answering, Hoshina climbs down from the rubble he was standing on. As they walk away, Hoshina tells Ibina he needs Kafka back, since during their last fight, Kafka wasn't using his full strength, and he wants another match. Ibina agrees. Kikoru hesitates outside her dad's office for a moment before finding the courage to go in. She initially tries to call Izao daddy, but catches herself and salutes him as Director General Shinomiya. She asks her dad not to eliminate Kafka because he once saved her life, but Izao calls her a fool for dwelling on her past failures. He shows her a document in his hand, and when Kikoru opens the envelope, she finds an extra inside. Isao tells her to look at the left side of Kafka's chest x-ray. He explains it looks like a heart, but it's actually Kafka's kaiju core. Izao insists Kafka isn't human since he's just like the kaiju that killed her mother, instructing her to leave if she understands. Kikoru turns to leave, but then turns back to tell Isao that she wants to believe in Kafka. Some scientists enter the room where Kafka is, and he asks if they're about to give him another physical exam. He tries to make a joke, but they don't laugh or respond. However, Kafka isn't going to give up easily, especially after what Ichikawa and Mina told him last time. Mina informs Ichikawa, Aoi, Iharu, and Izumo that they're being transferred to other divisions for officer training because Tachikawa is functioning at only 75% after the last attack and isn't suitable for recruits anymore. She explains that the higher-ups are worried they've seen too many high-class kaijus and might encounter even more soon. Therefore, they need to be prepared, and the boys are crucial to that. She adds that the most talented recruits among divisions will receive training at division borders, and Iharu is thrilled to be considered talented. Izumo seems to believe that this separation is a way to split everyone close to Kafka and keep tabs on them, but Mina dispels that idea by saying the plan has been in the works for a long time. Izumo insists he doesn't want to change divisions, and Iharu agrees because he likes Mina. However, Ichikawa says he's willing to go through with it, and even when Iharu tries to warn him that they'll be separated, Ichikawa stands firm. Outside the base, Izumo checks his call log, and at the same time, Aoi walks by, on the phone and pleading that he needs to save someone. He bows at the end of the call and turns to leave, but spots Izumo nearby. The two apologize for getting in each other's way, and Aoi starts to leave, but Izumo calls him back. Aoi sits beside Izumo on the floor, mentioning he was talking to his old commander from the JSDF. Izumo is surprised that Aoi is pulling strings to help Kafka, and Aoi reminds him that he said he didn't want to lose lose anyone in Division 3, and that includes Kafka. Feeling isolated, Kafka decides he just has to prove he's human, like Mina said. He knows he needs to talk to them and make them listen. Just then, Isao walks into the room with some officers. Kafka wonders if Isao will listen, so he shouts that he's human, not a kaiju, but Isao tells those in the operations room to release Kafka's bindings. The operator says this might be risky since Kafka is Kaiju no 8, but Isao reminds the operator that if Kafka really is a Daikaiju class, it means he's sitting there by choice, not because he can't free himself. Once Kafka steps out of the chair, Isao doesn't listen and shoots him multiple times, worrying Kikoru, who is watching with Keiji and Juzo from the operations room. Kafka stops the bullets with his transformed hands, but Isao plunges his hand into the Kaiju's body to draw some blood into a test tube. Isao tells Kafka that anyone who can stop bullets with their bare hands in their world cannot be considered human but is instead a Kaiju, calling him Kaiju no 8. Kafka refuses to accept that label and insists he's Hibino Kafka, not Kaiju no 8. Isao raises his hands, and those in the operations room take it as a signal to activate FS-1002. The officers with Isao open the suitcase they brought, and he puts on the hands inside. The FS-1002 activation, made from Kaiju no 2, is complete, and Isao declares he's ready to fully dispose of Kaiju no 8. Kafka decides he won't fully transform but will prove he's human. However, the first blow from Isao in his suit sends Kafka flying across the room. The moment Kafka stands up, Isao shoots him with a bullet from his hands, and Juzo is happy to see that their director, once known as the strongest man in the force, still has that strength. Hikaru is worried about Kafka, who has now foolishly transformed half of his face due to his rash choice not to fully transform. Isao says that Kafka looks more like his true self. Kafka decides he will keep dodging Isao until his suit overheats, but Isao has no intention of giving him a chance. He charges after Kafka like a mad dog, throwing punches at his head, stomach, chest, back, and every other possible part. After a few seconds, Kafka wonders why fighting Isao feels like battling a kaiju. In the operating room, Keiji explains to Kikoru that her father's suit was made from Kaiju no 2, the second kaiju to be numbered, which nearly destroyed Sapporo in 1972. Isao is the only one who can wear the suit made from that kaiju. Kafka finally realizes what Kikoru meant when she said suits were made from kaiju with numbers. Isao continues to punch Kafka back and forth, leaving him no room to breathe. Isao punches Kafka in the stomach, and just when Kafka thinks he shouldn't let Isao hit him again, he realizes he can't move because all his limbs have been severed. Isao lands another punch on Kafka in this helpless state, scaring Kikoru, and Kafka fully transforms to dodge the blow. Isao is pleased to see Kafka in his kaiju form, but Kikoru senses something is off. Kafka's face begins to crack, and Kaiju no 8 screams, shattering the glass in the operating room and confirming Kikoru's fears. Inside the kaiju, Kafka is confused about why he can't control his body anymore. Kaiju no 8 turns into a monster on the outside. The kaiju cell inside Kafka commands him to kill, and Kaiju no 8 speeds off, causing Kikoru to yell at the creature that he's human. Before the showdown between Isao and Kafka at headquarters, Ichikawa is working hard at the gym, and Iharu is puzzled by his intense effort. Iharu asks Ichikawa if he's not worried about Kafka and why he agreed to transfer to another unit. Ichikawa explains he needs to get stronger quickly because he doesn't want his weaknesses to stop him from protecting Kafka when he returns, believing that Kafka will come back soon. Iharu is inspired by Ichikawa's resolve and decides to train hard so he won't fall behind. Ebina, Nakanoshima, and Minase walk in on Iharu and Ichikawa arguing, asking if they're also struggling to focus on the day when the headquarters will decide Kafka's fate. Minase confidently assures them everything will turn out okay, believing in the letter of leniency they wrote together. Nakanoshima mentions that Mina was summoned to headquarters, surprising Ichikawa, but Minase believes it's because there's good news. When Mina arrives at headquarters, she's told to wait in the meeting room while Isao examines Kafka. She tries to sit down but is informed there's no seat for her since she's only an observer, so she remains standing. In his kaiju form, Kafka screams at Isao, while Kikoru tells him he's human, not a kaiju. Instead of hesitating, Kafka punches Isao, who dodges and watches Kafka's approach. Isao thinks Kafka is attacking like a mindless animal, not considering the openings left after an attack. Kafka slices himself in half, catching Isao off guard, and throws a punch with the upper half of his body, but Isao evades it. Isao is further astonished that Kafka is attacking in a way that damages his own body, confident that he'll regenerate quickly. He decides not to fight with typical human tactics, as that would only lead to his defeat. Kafka unleashes multiple punches, prompting Kikoru to shout, and when Isao finally breaks free, he realizes that attack could have killed him without the no 2 shield. Isao uses a force blast to send Kafka flying across the room, and Juzo explains in the operation room that Isao's technique expands its striking range using a sonic boom. Isao looks up, surprised to see Kafka's core is missing. He turns back and discovers that the kaiju's body was just a decoy used to regrow its core. Kafka is exhausted from the way his body fights and doubts he will survive. He punches Isao again, and this time, another layer of the room's shelter crumbles, shocking the scientists in the operation room since, by theory, it should withstand a force of 10.0. Keiji remarks that this was to be expected since two numbered kaijus are battling. Kikoru is impressed that her father is facing a numbered kaiju alone. Keiji finds the fight strange. If Izao had intended to kill Kafka all along, he could have done so right from the first attack when Kafka hadn't transformed. Keiji believes Isao is intentionally pushing Kafka to test him, and this thought warms Kikoru's heart. She remembers her chat with her father and wonders if he has decided to give Kafka a chance after all. On the rooftop, Ai tells Izumo that he joined the force to save lives, but Kafka saved him. He believes people shouldn't be judged by their backgrounds but by their actions, and Izumo agrees. Izumo stares at his father's contact on his phone, letting Aoi's words sink in. Kafka jumps and tries to slam Izao against a wall, but Izao dodges and counters with multiple blows from behind. Kafka turns around and lands a hit that shatters the suit on Izao's side, causing blood to spill. The blue lines on Kafka's kaiju form turn red, and Kafka thinks his strength is starting to exceed Isao's expectations. Kafka knows he needs to regain control of his body, but all he knows how to do is give up. Izao claps his hands together and shoots at Kafka, but the attack does little to no damage. Kafka screams internally, begging the kaiju to stop, but kaijus don't listen to dumb losers. Kafka's kaiju form grabs Isao and slams him against the wall, making him cough up blood. Like a renowned dumb loser, Kafka watches as the kaiju squeezes Isao, realizing he'll kill Isao if he doesn't act. He looks up at Kikoru as the kaiju picks up her father, slams him to the ground, throws him up, and slams him again. Kafka screams because he doesn't want to kill Izao in front of Kikoru. Kikoru remembers telling Kafka that if he becomes a kaiju that kills humans, she'll kill him. She thinks she has to do it now, but part of her still wants to believe in Kafka, so she shouts at him not to give in to the kaiju like a brainless idiot. Kafka tries to break free from the kaiju's control, but the kaiju opens its mouth, ready to swallow him. Kafka recalls that life has never worked out for him. The kaiju bites off Kafka, and he falls into a pool, legless. The kaiju goes berserk in front of Isao, who thinks his hope is lost. In despair, Kafka sees Mina coming to save him from his bottomless pit, telling him she'll always be waiting. Instead of delivering the final blow as the kaiju intended, blood bursts from the kaiju's back, and Kafka regains control. He tells Isao, "I'm Kafka, not a kaiju," before collapsing unconscious and transforming back to his normal self. The 1st Division captain, Narumi, points his weapon at Kafka, but Isao tells him to stand down. Narumi lowers his weapon and orders the other officers to do the same. He removes his mask and says he thought Isao was trying to get himself killed by not accepting help in the battle. Isao tells Narumi not to be stupid, even if Kafka exceeded his expectations. He orders the medics to take Kafka and warns that his core might be destroyed. Narumi asks Isao what he'll do next, but Isao doesn't respond. In the meeting room, Keiji tells Mina she can give her report now that Isao has finished his examination. He informs everyone that Mina knew Kafka even before he became an officer, but Mina assures them she's never shown him favoritism. Juzo tells Mina her report is just a formality and won't determine Kafka's fate since they've almost reached a decision. They tell her not to think her words will influence their final call. Mina says she'll let them decide whether Kafka is human or kaiju, but she'll explain his duties as an officer. She praises Kafka by highlighting his role in the Sagamihara neutralization operation, where he exposed the Yoju's reproductive organs and saved the 3rd Division from a Yoju bomb. The officers argue that these feats prove Kafka is a kaiju, and Mina surprisingly agrees. She adds that Kafka had 0 combat power when he first joined, failed the entrance exam 12 times before passing as a backup, and never gave up on saving others despite being the oldest recruit. She reminisces about their youth, when she cried over Miko, and Kafka stood by her side, holding her hand. Mina tells the officers that Kafka has more humanity than anyone, and believes his heart should determine whether he's trusted as an officer. The officers disagree, accusing her of covering for her subordinate, but Izao thanks her and asks her to return to her post. They inform Izao they're ready to dispose of Kafka and want his decision. Before Izao finishes, Kafka is shown in a tube, recalling his childhood with Mina and his promise to protect her from kaiju. That's why, during his fight with Izo, he decided to die in his human form if it came to that. Kafka wakes up, shocked to be alive, and even more surprised to see Izao by his bedside. Izao tells him to calm down, assuring him he's not there to harm him. Kafka is relieved Isao is alive, as he wouldn't know how to face Kikoru if he'd killed her father. This surprises Isao. Kafka asks if they've accepted him as human, but Isao points to the scar on his chest, saying if he had a true heart, he would have died in battle. Isao reveals they've decided Kafka is a kaiju but will assess if he's a threat later. At the meeting, Isao announces Kafka will fight for them and won't be turned into a weapon. The officers object, citing no precedent, but Izao argues Kafka can be controlled, and has already worked with Division 3. He adds they can't guarantee a weapon made from Kafka would be as powerful as Kafka himself, so it's better to keep him as a weapon. Juzo insists there's no precedent, but Izao counters that precedence is irrelevant to national defense. He reminds them of the disaster caused by Kaiju No 10 years ago, which claimed 200 officers and 3 captains. Keiji adds Isao's wife was also lost. Isao believes they stand a better chance against Kaiju with Kafka on their side, but the officers remain opposed. Isao tells Kafka Kafka to prove his worth if he wants to survive, and Kafka realizes the defense force is keeping him alive to use him as a weapon. He tells Isao he sees himself as an officer and will ensure they accept him. Mina sends a message as she leaves headquarters. Kikoru receives it, relieved that Kaiju number 8's disposal has been deferred, but she knows she must grow stronger in case she needs to defeat Kafka. Aoi and Izumo also get the message, and Izumo initially thinks it's from the SDF, but Aoi corrects him. Izumo is thrilled Kafka has won this victory. Ichikawa receives the message, but before he can respond, Iharu shouts beside him, celebrating. Minase and Nakanoshima are also glad Kafka has overcome. Iharu tells Ichikawa the news, and Ichikawa reminds him he predicted Kafka would return. Ichikawa vows to be stronger when Kafka comes back. Okanogi tells Hoshina she's glad things worked out for Kafka, but Hoshina thinks the hard part is just beginning. He says people will eventually discover there's a kaiju in the force, and it'll be up to Kafka to prove they can accept his help. Kafka falls asleep while talking to Aizawa, mumbling for Mina to wait for him. The cleaners lose a chess game and wonder how player number 9, who joined last week, is now at the top of the leaderboard. Kaiju no 9, the player, believes he now understands mankind's intellectual level. He thinks humans acquire knowledge across generations, and is ready to move to the next phase, reclaiming the kaiju power that fell into human hands.